I do believe I'll be having the honor of taking Cuba.
Cuba poses no threat to us, yet we are strangling an entire nation with economic warfare.
The Venezuelan government, well, Venezuela had been now the main supplier of oil to Cuba. And so the U.S. has stopped all Venezuelan oil shipments to Cuba.
Real estate, I hear greed. Between 2021 and 2023, 850,000 Cubans left for the United States. That's nearly 8% of the entire population, leaving Cuba seeking opportunity.
Marco Rubio, bitch ass, is leading the attack against the island, but the people have an inextinguishable spirit and have made it clear that they won't surrender and turn back into a giant casino for the mafia.
So why is Donald Trump treating Cubans like this? Why? Like, for what? In this episode, I have a couple of videos to show you people sharing their thoughts and talking about what is actually happening in Cuba, what America has turned Cuba into. We all know how Cuba has been in tatters for some years now. And now Donald Trump is doing something that has just plunged the country into darkness. And it's doing a lot of harm than good. But I don't want to talk plenty. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe. Let's go into the video, watch, come back and talk.
Last week, US President Donald Trump spoke about taking over Cuba.
I do believe I'll be having the honor of taking Cuba.
It follows Cuba's national electricity grid collapsing for the second time in a week as the country continues to battle an ongoing energy and humanitarian crisis. More than 10 million people have been impacted, with water and waste management services also affected.
But how did we get here? How did it get so bad? And why does Trump want to take Cuba?
We'll start with the short answer, oil. Cuba mostly relies on foreign exports for their oil supply, primarily imported from Venezuela. Following the US's removal of Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro from power in January this year, the United States imposed a blockade on Venezuelan oil entering Cuba. This only added to economic tension the United States has been imposing on Cuba for decades, following on from the Cuban Revolution and nuclear missile crisis of the 60s under Fidel Castro.
The US embargo has been in place on Cuba since 1960, and that makes it very difficult for foreign companies to invest in Cuba. It's the longest embargo in history.
Their energy infrastructure relies almost entirely on oil to power their grid, as does their water and transportation systems. So, naturally, things have devolved and the country is in crisis.
So, does the US really want to take over Cuba?
As of last week, reports circulated that the US government is seeking a similar approach to Venezuela, where lifting the economic sanctions to the country would be dependent on the removal of Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel from power. The belief among experts is that the US is in opposition to the country's system of government, following on from the Cuban Revolution.
There's a contingent of people that left Cuba in the 1950s and 1960s who envision going back and getting their land back, which the Cuban government, the Cuban Revolution, confiscated from them. And it's worth noting that Marco Rubio and his family are part of that cohort of people.
Cuba has since rejected any change to its leadership or system of government as part of the deal.
Really, since the end of the Cold War, the Cuban government has been studying and gradually implementing ways to integrate Cuba into the capitalist world economy. And it began with tourism in the 1990s and then into transport and food and infrastructure.
Professor Adrian Hearn from the University of Melbourne thinks the path forward is potentially more diplomatic.
So since that goal of opening up the economy is shared by the US government and the Cuban government, it would make sense for the US and its allies to support the reforms that are already underway in Cuba.
Outside of political stability, there's other reasons for the US to have an interest in taking control of Cuba, were things to progress that far.
Cuba has large reserves of nickel, and also Cuba has a lot of oil in its northwestern maritime territory. But the problem with that oil is that it's hidden under a layer of really hard rock. And so until now, it's not made economic sense. It's too expensive to actually get at that oil.
So what's next for Cuba?
The current lack of oil means generators can't operate, impacting hospitals, hotels, which Cuba's tourism-driven economy relies on, refrigerators, and garbage trucks, meaning the streets are piling up with uncollected rubbish, increasing the threat of disease and illness. A number of humanitarian groups have sent aid packages, including Nuestra America and even the Mexican government. However, people continue to suffer. The world is waiting to see what deal can be struck to allow economic prosperity to return, and under what terms?
Mr. Speaker, like many Americans, I am outraged by what Trump is doing to the Cuban people. The oil blockade enacted by the Trump administration is cruel and indefensible. Cuba poses no threat to us, yet we are strangling an entire nation with economic warfare. Families are going without food, water systems are failing, hospitals are struggling to stay open. These tactics are designed to suffocate an island into submission, and its civilians, ordinary Cuban men, women, and children, are paying the price. Make no mistake, this unconscionable suffering is occurring because Trump is trying to force regime change. Across our country and around the world, people are standing in solidarity with the Cuban people. They are calling for dignity, for humanity, for an end to this harm. Hands off Cuba. End the blockade now, and I yield back.
The entire country of Cuba just officially lost power. 11 million people are sitting in complete darkness right now. So basically, the entire electrical grid in Cuba just collapsed, and the Ministry of Energy confirmed a complete disconnection of the national system. Every single city, every single home, every single hospital, 11 million people went dark all at the same time. This is officially the third full island blackout in just 4 months. Cuba hasn't been able to receive an oil shipment in over 3 months, and the country produces about 40% of its own fuel, but that's not enough to keep the grid running. They're saying that the infrastructure has not been properly maintained in years. Experts are saying that the power plants are running on heavy oil that's corroding the equipment from the inside. One professor who's tracked Cuba for decades said that the technicians that are keeping it running right now are magicians, given the condition that it's in. By Monday night, crews had only been able to restore power to about 5% of Havana, which is about 42,000 customers, along with several hospitals. Officials have already been having to warn that even those small circuits could fail again, and there is currently no official timeline for when the power is supposed to come back, so that is an entire country in the dark with no end in sight.
Cuba is being strangled by a total blockade of fuel to the island. Not a single drop of oil has entered since December 3rd. Thousands of life-saving surgeries are halting. Food is wasting, and 10 million people are facing rolling blackout. The United States has escalated a 60-year-long embargo to the island as retaliation for defying global imperialism. Marco Rubio, bitch ass, is leading the attack against the island, but the people have an inextinguishable spirit and have made it clear that they won't surrender and turn back into a giant casino for the mafia like it was before the revolution. The U.S. is even trying to pressure countries in the region to kick out Cuban doctors, which is one of their main exports, depriving millions of poor people of health care. It's just a genocidal campaign through and through. And so we're calling on the United States government to lift the blockade and let Cuba live.
Every ventilator patient in Cuba right now is at risk of losing their lives, and nobody is talking about it. Power went out again, third time in March, might I mention. 10 million Cubans have absolutely no electricity. Every single province. Witness reported every single patient on ventilators died tonight. Hospitals are postponing surgeries. Medicines are rotting without refrigeration, running on 40% of needed fuel, by the way. Cuba has yet, in the past 3 months, to receive any oil. Russia sent a tanker with 730,000 barrels of oil, and can you guess what happened to it? The U.S. Treasury blocked it and instead diverted it to Trinidad. Second Russian tanker, nicknamed the in quotations Seahorse, carrying 200,000 barrels itself, was also blocked. Q babies, dialysis patients, ventilator patients, all at the mercy of a grid that keeps dying. Do keep in mind, this is Cuba's 6th nationwide blackout in only 18 months. Keep in mind, the U.S. sent $6 million in humanitarian aid in February while blocking all oil. It's fucking theater. You are toying with the lives of literal humans, innocent humans at that. Shit is fucking sick, and it needs to be talked about.
We're on one of the major avenues in Havana right now, and as you can see, it's completely blacked out. Cuba is right now suffering the second complete power outage that this island has experienced in the space of a week. Once again, the aging infrastructure here is giving out, and that's incredibly concerning for many people. Cubans are, of course, no strangers to blackouts. It's something that's been fairly common in the last several years. But what's changed recently is the Trump administration has placed a total oil embargo on this island. And what that means is that there are fewer cars on the road, almost no cars, few passing here. Schools have had their hours cut. Hospitals are often in total darkness because they don't have oil for the generators. Life is grinding to a halt here. And so the Cuban government is negotiating with the U.S. government because the Trump administration says they want to see major changes take place here. They want to see the communist-run government open up, both politically and economically. The Cuban government says they're open to negotiations, but they won't make major concessions. It's hard to see, though, in the dark for the days to come, how they really have any other option.
I don't know what the United States is doing right now, and it doesn't make any sense, because you may remember that the United States had an oil blockage on Cuba, essentially stopping any ship who came through was cut off by the US Coast Guard. And then today, we saw that an oil tanker owned by the Russians, with roughly 730,000 barrels of oil, was inching closer and closer and went past the Coast Guard. It didn't get stopped. And if you do the calculations, it looks like it could actually be docking in Cuba within the next few hours. So why would the United States, who's put so much pressure onto Cuba to do, which we're assuming is some kind of regime change, allow a vessel through when they're blocking everything else? And to add more information to this, the New York Times actually just released something saying they spoke to someone in the administration, and they said that the US Coast Guard has 2 cutters there that would have been able to intercept said ship, but the Trump administration had never given orders to intercept that vessel, saying that bearing orders instructing it otherwise, the Coast Guard planned to let the tanker reach Cuba as of Sunday. But why stop every other ship but allow this one in? That's a question we don't have an answer to. I'll be sure to keep you guys updated on this, so please do share my videos and follow me.
Cuba is literally disappearing off the map. Right now, 10 million people are trapped in a total nationwide blackout with no end in sight. The island's largest power plant suffered a catastrophic failure, and the backup systems have zero fuel to run. Now, this isn't just about the lights. No power means no water pumps and no refrigeration. Food is rotting in the tropical heat, and hospitals are running on the brink of a total shutdown. Why is this happening? It's because the lifeline of Cuba is gone. Following the massive shift in Venezuela earlier this year, Cuba's primary oil supply has been severed by a tightening naval blockade. Enter the US's position. President Trump has transitioned from sanctions to maximum pressure. His administration's goal, a total economic squeeze to force a regime change. He's leveraging this energy collapse to push for a friendly takeover. The message from Washington is clear. No democratic reforms, no fuel. As the island nears a humanitarian breaking point, the world is watching. Is this the end of an era in Havana, or the start of a massive regional crisis? Don't worry, Cubans. Trump has already said that Cuba is next, so your turn is coming. If you like breakdowns like this, make sure to like and share this video and follow my page for more.
Okay, so I'll give you the short version first, and then if you want to stick around, I'll give you the longer explanation. So the short version is that the Cuban economy has been seriously struggling really since the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, 1992. The USSR was its main trading partner and was really holding up the Cuban economy that was suffering because of the US embargo, which I'll talk about in a second. But why right now? Why is there a huge oil and energy crisis right now? It's because of the US intervention and invasion of Venezuela. So the US going in, taking out Maduro, disrupting the Venezuelan government. Well, Venezuela had been now the main supplier of oil to Cuba. And so the US has stopped all Venezuelan oil shipments to Cuba. And so basically they are like on borrowed time. They're running out of oil for energy. Okay, if you want the bigger context, the US embargo on Cuba has been going on really since 1960. So the Cuban Revolution happened in 1959, where they kicked out the dictator Fulgencio Batista, who was backed by the United States. He was very friendly to American capitalists, to the extent that American businesses owned a lot of Cuba, owned a lot of Cuban land, Cuban companies, all that sort of thing. And Fulgencio Batista was fine with that because he was in power, he was backed by the US military, whatever. Castro comes in and kicks out Batista, kind of impressively actually, and he instates his new government, which eventually becomes a communist government. He originally didn't say he was a communist or anything like that, but he does come in and do what a lot of Latin American leaders do when they want to eradicate colonial influence, and that is nationalize resources. And I'm telling you, during the Cold War, if you're a Latin American leader and you say the words nationalize resources or redistribute land, ooh, the CIA's coming and they're about to try to coup you. So in June of 1960, President Eisenhower stops exporting oil to the island. This is just the beginning of what's going to grow to be the full embargo. This is his justification in a letter to the British Prime Minister. He's basically saying, hey, they've canceled elections, they're purging all the moderates, they're executing enemies of the state. A lot of Cuban exiles are having to flee for their lives, which is all true. But I would also say there were not free and fair elections under Batista. So this is not a justified excuse from the American perspective, because the government we were supporting before was doing all of the same things. But finally, here's the thing I want us to understand about the U.S. embargo on Cuba, because it's bigger than I even thought. So I understood that the embargo meant that U.S. Americans couldn't do business with Cuba. What I didn't understand is the impact it had on just global business. So let's say you're a European business that wants to do business with Cuba, you're a bank, you want to give a loan to a company or whatever, you are prohibited from using US dollars, using US origin parts, or having any US parent companies involved. And so basically you have to be incredibly careful if you are a business anywhere around the world. It's very risky to do business with Cuba because you could risk losing access to the entire US economy.
The island of Cuba is near total collapse. No oil, no food, no electricity, and it keeps getting worse. What is happening in Cuba and why? The answer is Donald Trump. Let's break it down. Cuba is facing one of the worst humanitarian and economic crises in decades. The country is out of fuel, which means that there's barely cars and public transport on the roads. They are running out of food with long queues for basic supplies. The entire country has blackouts due to grid collapse. Hospitals are barely functional and many Cubans are leaving the country. How did Cuba get to this point? Cuba and the US have been beefing for years. But when Obama came into office, he began efforts to ease sanctions and hostilities against Cuba. The Obama government began having talks with Cuba. A major turning point came under Trump's administration. He reversed all the agreements that Obama entered into. He introduced over 200 new sanctions on Cuba, targeting tourism, fuel imports, and foreign businesses. Trump also placed Cuba back on the list of state sponsors of terrorism, making it harder for Cuba to access global banking and trading. The goal, as always, is regime change and replace it with a more authoritarian regime like they did in Venezuela. Cuba relies heavily on imports, and Trump knew that using the US military to quarantine the island would mean that nothing goes in and out of Cuba. Also, Cuba relied heavily on Venezuelan fuel, which means that Trump has now taken over Venezuela, and that means they have no fuel. With no fuel, no food coming into the country for 2 months, the country is down on its knees. To fully understand the hostility between the US and Cuba, you would need to backtrack to the Cuban Revolution of 1959. Fidel Castro took over power and Cuba became a communist state that is aligned with the Soviet Union. The US responded with hostility, including a failed attempt to invade Cuba in what is known as the Bay of Pigs invasion. Many other events of escalating hostility followed, including the Cuban Missile Crisis. Trump reignited this beef, taking stakes to a higher level. He wants Cuba to make a deal or be the next Venezuela. He talks about Cuba like a piece of real estate that he can just take willingly. Do you think that South Africa is next in line? Add your opinions in the comments.
Cuba's power grid is collapsed. The island has been dark for days. Russia sent oil tankers to help, and the world packed medicine and solar panels, and that's getting through, thankfully. But the oil, today, the United States blocked that too. I've been to Cuba. I've walked those streets. This is not a victory. It's a humanitarian crisis, and the United States is engineering it. We're complicit. Last week, Trump publicly mused about having the honor of taking Cuba, spoken like a man who is used to getting what he wants, a man accused of sexual assault numerous times. Disgusting. Here's what I think what's actually going on. Trump has wanted to build hotels, casinos, and golf courses in Cuba since 1998. He registered the Trump trademark there in 2008. There are actual sketches of the Trump Tower Havana. So when he talks about taking Cuba, I don't hear freedom. I hear oceanfront real estate. I hear greed. Between 2021 and 2023, 850,000 Cubans left for the United States. That's nearly 8% of the entire population, leaving Cuba seeking opportunity. Now, Trump has banned their visas and is deporting the ones who made it. 403 people have been sent back since January. So what are we doing? Blocking the oil, collapsing the grid, ban the legal path here, deport the ones who made it. That is not policy. That's a siege. And the numbers on the ground in Cuba are staggering. 64% of the island has no reliable power. The average Cuban is in the dark 15 to 20 hours a day, and even hospitals are facing regular interruptions. Internet traffic dropped 65% when the grid went down, and most Cubans can't get online. It's always been challenging there, but right now it's especially bad. They can't see what's being said about them. They are in the dark in every sense of the word. I made a video with the full history, and I'm going to tag that in the comments. You can see what it looks like here. But the short version, layered U.S. sanctions, COVID, and a full oil blockade have left Cuba's reserves near zero. But thankfully, the rest of the world is showing up, or at least they're trying to. An international convoy delivered 5 tons of medical supplies, cancer drugs, antibiotics, surgical materials, all valued at over $570,000. That arrived March 18th. Travelers are hand-carrying medical kits on commercial flights all week. And a Mexican flotilla departed the port of Progreso on the 19th. 140 activists left Miami this morning with more aid. And tomorrow, March 21st, they will all converge at the port of Havana. 20 tons of food, medicine, and solar panels. And Russia had 2 tankers en route, 730,000 barrels of crude, enough for 9 to 10 days, just 9 to 10 days of Cuban energy needs. The first shipment from any nation in 3 months. And then today, the United States Treasury formally blocked it, while the ships are already in the water. How does the U.S. have this power? Well, on January 29th of this year, Trump signed Executive Order 14380, officially declaring Cuba as a national security threat, triggering a law called IEEPA, which lets him sanction any foreign entity doing business with Cuba. OFAC, the Treasury's enforcement arm, blacklists the ships directly. And once blacklisted, they're cut off completely from the global financial system because the world runs on US dollars. No bank will touch them, and no American-linked port will let them dock. Defy it, and your country faces tariffs. That's American economic power, weaponized against a small island right now. If blocking a civilian population's energy supply while calling it policy sounds familiar, it should. We watched this in Gaza. Different country, same playbook. Ordinary people paying the price for political chess. Look, you can want change for Cuba and believe there's a legal, humane path to get there, one that doesn't involve starving people into submission. I'm beside myself over this. Tell me where you stand in the comments, and be sure to like, share, and follow. Unfortunately, this story is far from over, and my heart is breaking for the Cuban people. The full history is tagged below.
Hello, I'm a Cuban living in Cuba, and even though most of my videos are usually in the kitchen, today it's going to be different because I wanted to show you a different side of Cuba now that we're struggling with this fuel crisis. Basically, I want to show you some avenues of my country and how they look with everything that's happening at the moment. Stay tuned and see what I'm talking about.
Most of the streets I'm going to show you are not just streets. They're considered big avenues here in Cuba. And yes, as you can see, some of them have cars. But I noticed that not just cars, but mostly tricycles that work with electricity, and also electric bikes are the ones that are moving the most. I've also saw some cars, and most of them belong to embassies and to government-related institutions, which means that the fuel is mostly going there.
I'm in Havana, Cuba right now, and there is a nationwide blackout. I'm about in the only place that still has fuel to run generators, which is their foreign hotels. But every single building is dark. Behind me, to my left, is the Capitol building. That too is dark. This is caused by Trump cutting off all energy to the island of 11 million people, and it's not the leaders or foreigners like me who are suffering the most. It is the people on the streets. It is the people who can't afford fuel anymore. They can't afford charcoal. They can't afford candles. It's collective punishment meant to deter people from resisting imperialism, and we need to put a stop to this. As an American, it's our duty to, at the very least, lend our voices to the Cuban people, because it is our money, is our leaders, it is our state power that is causing so much suffering. This blockade's been going on since 1960 when the revolution happened, and Trump has only made it so much worse. I spent the day walking the streets of Havana speaking with Cuban people, and they all told me the same thing. Trump has fucked them over. He has made life so much more difficult for them. And when I told them, you know, I'm from America, I'm here to support them, you know, they showed so much love. And guys, like, it's really a different experience being here. I don't know what I was expecting, but Viva Cuba, for real.
It's hard not to feel a sense of melancholy as you walk the streets of Havana. There are signs of struggle everywhere. Domestic waste piles up around street corners, and these once majestic buildings are slowly crumbling in on top of each other. It truly feels like Cuba is at a turning point, on a knife's edge even. This volatile reality formed the backdrop to my journey, a trip some people warned me not to take at a time of mounting political pressure and economic hardship. It feels more important than ever to document this music, to listen to the musicians who are carrying it, and to honor the resilience embedded at the very heart of these rhythms. Because this isn't just music, this is the sound of survival, the sound of resistance, and the enduring heartbeat of a small revolutionary island still playing on against all odds.
Why does one country, America, all the time makes it look like they are the savior, but rather they are the villain, treating other countries like their own, a sovereign nation for that matter? Venezuela, Cuba, Libya, we can mention so many countries that America has just invaded their countries and just doing things that shouldn't be done to a sovereign country. I just don't get it. Always America. Why not Russia? Why not Japan? Why not India? Why not China? All the time America, all the time America. What is all this? It is becoming too much. It has actually become too much. One country treating another country like some trash, just invading the country and doing whatever, all because you have nukes, you have missiles, so they are afraid of you. Because if not, tell me what at all does America have that Cubans should be afraid of, if not for all of those things that they have. If they say a country is giant, a country is big, a country is whatever, it is because of some of these things. That's why anybody, any country that tries to get the same thing, they try to invade that country because they are afraid that they cannot control that country. And this is what they've been doing for years. Babies are being lost. Newborn babies are being lost. People are losing their lives because of all this in hospitals in Cuba. For what? And he doesn't care. He's just there saying whatever because he is in America. The United Nations is quiet, and these people are just doing whatever they like. No sanction, nothing is happening to them. Nobody. Is it fair? Thank you so much for watching.